All right, I think we're gonna get started. Yeah. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for coming. I know that with the winter storm and everything that's been happening recently, I know that a lot of you are out on the field doing a lot of arbor work. So I'm really, really grateful that you were able to spend around 30 minutes to an hour with us here today. So today we are going to be presenting WiltCast. WiltCast is a project that we've been working on for a quite a long time since I believe we came up with our idea to pursue this project back in July of last year. And since then, we've been working through not only the research process, but having the opportunity to talk with so many great mentors, a lot of whom are here today. Let's get started. So my name is Ruhan Gupta,
And I'm Varun Sanghavi.
and this is WiltCast. We're going to start with just a little bit of information about us. We're both high school juniors, actually, from Austin, Texas, in the United States. And my work specifically focuses on a lot of problems that are overlooked in society. Over the past few years, we've obviously seen a really big change in motivations for research in terms of how profitable can they be, how much impact can they create, and things like that. And so what I've seen is there are so many important problems, including Oakville, which are just underfunded to begin with. They just don't have the resources in total. So I've thought that for as long as I can, I'd like to start working on these challenges and see what I can contribute. So that's about me.
Yeah, so I kind of come from a similar background. I'm also a junior from Austin, Texas. I'm more excited to work on like the robotics side of things, where you can use the digital world in order to solve real world problems. And especially in our area, Oakville has been a huge real world problem. Because if you walk down the street and there's dead trees all around you, obviously that affects both your mood and the health of the community everywhere. So, another reason I have a large stake in this project is I do love nature and I love hiking, and we can't do that without our oak trees.
And we're presenting WillCast.
So, oak wilt is a huge problem here in the US, affecting more than 25 states, and it causing millions of dollars per damage per year. So, some of the reasons why it's so bad is because it's very complex and very unpredictable. So, it spreads two ways, both underground through root grafts and overground through beetles, which take the spores from infected trees and bring it to new trees. So because of this, the spread is very unpredictable. There's too many variables, and the way that oak wilt kills a tree is that it kind of plugs up the tree and makes it so that water can't go um, throughout the tree, essentially making it die of thirst, which is why it is very often confused with drought. So as of now, once a tree is infected, there are two current solutions in order to prevent it from infect or in order to try and prevent it from infecting more trees. So neither is perfect, but they both have their own pros and cons. So the first is trenching, with the pros being that you don't need any chemicals to do this, and it creates a long-term barrier to isolate the infected tree. So basically, what trenching is you essentially cut a trench around the infected tree. So as you could infer, that would be very disruptive to the community around it because there's a giant trench in the ground, and it can be very expensive. The other method is fungicide injections, which is good because it's good for high value oaks and it's not very intrusive to anything around the tree, but it also is very expensive. It does leave drilling wounds, and it only works in the early stages of the disease. So neither of these methods are super ideal. So that's why we want to mitigate the amount of both trenching and injections that we're doing using WiltCast. Okay, so the way we can mitigate those cases is by knowing where oak wilt is going to spread. And that leads me into what is predictive modeling. Predictive modeling uses historical data, which is the past, and machine learning algorithms in combination with what's happening in the present in order to make a prediction about the future. So it identifies the key patterns of what happens in the past and kind of extrapolates them to the future so that we can kind of have an idea of what'll happen then. So these predictions can help us solve real world problems. So an example is a business that can predict their future sales and profits by using predictive modeling. So they would use their past transaction data from whatever time frame they have or choose to use. And they would also use the present market conditions, which could be like how much tax the government is charging, the taste for that good, etc. And eventually they'll get a sales prediction for the future, which they can use to make decisions to help bolster their business.
So, combined with the previous information about predictive modeling and the really big issue about oak wilt, we've built a research question here, which we hope can address a really big issue about predicting oak wilt. So, our research question states, how can we use predictive modeling to predict the spread of oak wilt over a 6 to 24 month period with at least 90% accuracy using current infection locations and environmental and geospatial data? So using predictive modeling is great for this case because we are still looking at past data and present data to predict the future. And with a spread of 6 to 24 months, for a period of 6 to 24 months, that is a really critical period in a widespread outbreak. For a lot of the cases that we've looked at, over the period of 3-ish years, there have been really, really big devastations within the first 2 years of that outbreak, and then it starts to kind of near the end of the outbreak spread. So as we can see that it's a really important window for us to be doing some predictive modeling and to test if we can potentially stop this outbreak early. We also know that with the costs of trenching and fungicide injections, we want to reduce the risk of false positives as much as possible. So we aimed for around a 90% accuracy in total. And again, we use environmental and geospatial data to create, in addition to current infection locations, in order to use the past and present information to predict the future. Building WiltCast was done in three main steps. We first did some training, and then we validated our model, and then we concluded with creating some outputs and a UI for arborists to use. All right. So we begin first with the training process. So for the data that we use to train WiltCast, we got that from two main data sources. The first one was from NASA APIs. So NASA has a really great free database for a lot of important environmental data all the way back to 1970-ish. So this was really, really good for our use case. So we pull wind speed, rainfall, temperature, and humidity data from the NASA APIs so that we have really concrete information about what the environment was like at that time and in specific areas dating all the way back to a few decades ago. And then secondly, thanks to our brilliant geospatial analysts and researchers at the City of Austin, we were able to obtain 40 full years of confirmed cases by the City of Austin in Texas. So we're really, really grateful for this because this was incredibly important for modeling these previous infections and to see how WiltCast could take these previous infections and predict the future with them. So now we have 40 full years of City of Austin data, which are just a lot of confirmed cases over the years. And so we need a way to create these specialized and localized models of how oak will spread over that time. So we did this by using spatial clustering. Basically, what we do is we go through the entire data set and we have a list of parameters that we want to bunch together some of these records. So a couple examples are here, like we want to have at least 2 consecutive years of cases to show the spread over 2 years. We want at least 3 confirmed records, and then we get rid of some incredibly large outliers, which may be less of an issue about the outliers of the oak wilt in like the biological sense, but more about an outlier in the algorithmic sense where we're creating these clusters. I have an example of these clusters for you on the left side. So this is at Garrison Park on Menchaca Road in Austin, Texas, from 2017 to 2019, and this is a real case that happened. As you can see here, from 2017, which is indicated by these purple dots, to 2019, which are these yellow dots, we've created a cluster to show the spread over 2 years. So if we start here with these dark purple dots here, you can see how the spread went outwards from this initial points. As we get to like the dark green, olive green area, you can see that the spread moved outwards up here to the left and then down here near the right. And then as we reached 2018 and 2019, we can see that we had a lot more spread that kind of went from this main area all the way up and then infected all these trees here. And then we had a few extra cases that around here as well. And so clusters like these are really important. Like we got so much information just by looking at this one photo, this one diagram. So it's this information is really helpful to WiltCast. All of these are essentially spatio-temporal progressions, and these are basically the progressions of oak wilt over space and time. This is important for us to apply to the machine learning aspect of this project, and we employed two main techniques in order to train WiltCast off this data. The first is actually related to physics. We use the Kepler inverse square law in order for us to test the difference in distance and how that affects the spread of oak wilt. So if I have two trees and I put them a whole kilometer apart, um, the chance that one tree that carries the pathogen will infect the other is very, very, very low. But if I put them just 20 feet closer together, then since they're so close, are only 20 feet away from each other, the chance that one tree can affect the other due to root grafting is much, much higher. And so this is the idea behind the inverse square law and applied to this project. And then secondly, we have the gradient boosting. This is more of a machine learning traditional technique. But since we don't have an extensive list of 40 years of healthy trees in Austin, that's like simply not feasible. We needed a new way to train WiltCast and teach it to learn based off of its previous mistakes. So gradient boosting backtracks the model after each iteration of training, and it takes a new path and it sees that the accuracy becomes better. And then after it continues doing this after a few more iterations, we end up with a robust model that learns the patterns, not just the data. So we have a model now. We need to test if it's accurate, if it's going to be reliable in the real world. So we use historical validation for this case. As previously stated, we don't have an accurate data set of healthy trees over 40 entire years. So how do we test for false positives? Well, we need to add in these healthy trees to do some initial testing. So as you can see up here in the top right, we have a case in South Austin in 2017. But these gray trees here aren't actually real trees. These are algorithmically random phantom trees that we've added in as healthy tree placeholders. And this helps us find these false positives when we're training the model. So I'll give you a quick key here. So these purple dots right here, these three ones are actually originally infected trees that were there at the site of the infection in 2017. And then these yellow bordered dots, these right here, are actually infected. These are infected cases after 2017. After these three original trees were infected, these three had spread the disease to the other three trees. And these red dots are all the infections that were afterwards that are actually these gray dots right here. So, right, as you can see down here, we've combined the phantom tree information, all these gray ones, with the later infections, because to the model, these yellow bordered dots seem gray to them. It just treats all of these trees as healthy trees. Combined with these purple infected trees, we run these through WiltCast to predict the infections, and we do a quick analysis for most of our clusters. First, did WiltCast accurately predict all subsequent infections? As we can see up here, it did. These three trees that were going to be infected after 2017 and caused by these three purple trees were infected. So we can see that WiltCast was accurate in predicting these trees. And then, did WiltCast predict with little to no false positives? The answer for this project is yes, but since we actually extrapolated this data into 2 full years, into 24 months, we can see what would have happened to the spread had it not been stopped right there. So we can see that these red dots right here, without the yellow borders, are these gray dots just infected or most likely to be infected by WiltCast. We're really, really proud to say that after going through all 70 of our clusters and thousands of records, that we have achieved roughly 90% of all historical infections captured by WiltCast when running our historical validation. All right, so now we have outputs. How are we able to take this model and give it to arborists who need it the most? So we begin by just creating a UI here in order to select these trees and in order to run the analysis. As we've added one extra dot right here, this orange one that shows the infected trees during that month, which is really helpful as we do a quick time lapse of the infection over time. So this is the first really important output that you can get from this model. And the second one is just a distance calculation, but this is the estimated spread rate over that period in time. So as you can see here for this case, which is a future outbreak, this isn't like one that happened in the past. This is a real outbreak that could happen in the future. And it's predicting an average rate of spread for 70 feet per year. We know that during peak season, there's so many cases of oak wilt that pop up around Austin and around your community. So we hope that an estimated spread rate is able to help prioritize which clusters need dealing the most. All right, let's do a quick demo. So this is the same UI that I showed you on the slide deck. Let's begin with a quick historical validation. So let me load a new scenario. And these are clusters that we had analyzed from the City of Austin data. I think this is a good one to use right here. This was in 2009 on September 7th. And this had a total of 56 trees, including these algorithmically generated ones. Let me run the validation here and let's see what it says. So it seems here that this spread was a little quick, but based off of our analysis, we can see that over a couple months or so, we were able to predict these original infections and see how the disease was able to spread over that time. So we have a couple cases here, and then these yellow aborted dots, as we explained, are actually infected cases that will happen in the future. So we can see that this is how we kind of ran our historical validation to test how WiltCast was reacting to these not only phantom points, but also to predict these real life cases that happened in the past. All right, let's go and do a spatial transmission model. Let me clear the map. This is what it's going to look like if an arborist wants to use this app. If I select the infected button here, then I can click on where some infected trees may be. So let's say that across Saddle Drive here, we have perhaps two infected trees that are right here. I can then select some healthy trees that are within the area. So I'm going to put a couple here to show a progression, and I'll put some on this side as well, maybe one back here. And we ideally would like to have as much data as possible in this area. So roughly, hopefully a 200 feet radius from the infections are ideal since we know that within the spread of roughly 1 year or so, it's quite unlikely for it to go all the way up to 200 feet per year. But I think this is good. As you can see here, these were actually added in before when we were doing some quick testing. But if you would like to use NASA data for just today, then you can. Otherwise, you can override some of these with some data that you may have. Let's run analysis. And we can see right here that over the spread of 88 feet per year, we see that roughly by month three or so, we've reached this point where all of these are most likely to be infected. Um, Around this time, in around March. And then over the next few months, we see that the infection spreads to this area next. So it spreads from here outwards to the left a bit later than it does to the right. And if we were to add some more trees around this, then again, we can see how the spread affects, how the increased amount of data can affect where the model believes the infection will go next. So we believe that this is quite useful. If we were to go back to a previous month here, let's say we were here in month three, then we can see that the next trees that are most likely to be infected are these. We could do some smaller trenching here. We could maybe be very specific about where to use our fungicide injections, things like that, to stop the spread from going any further past here. And as you can see here, we have an estimated spread rate of 88 feet per year, which it seems in line with previous hypotheses. So one more thing that I want to mention before we go back is we have done a lot of literature review on this project. So we looked into a lot of research, especially by Texas A&M University, and we learned about a lot of the work that David Apple did before he retired. Uh, there's a research paper that he did a few years ago where he used information over a period of a few years to create a hypothesis over the spread of oak wilt. So I believe he predicted roughly 75 feet per year is the average spread for oak wilt within an area here in Central Texas. Um, After running all of our clusters and all of our evaluations, we got a total predicted spread of around 75.6 feet per year. And so we're really, really, really proud to say that with our current information, we are able to a certain extent, obviously, we would want to, continue with this validation, but we're really happy to say that we have some more computational proof behind the hypothesis beyond just observations, and we'll look to publish this research soon to contribute this to the field. But that's all for the demo. Let's get back to the presentation.
Okay, so if you're an arborist, you might be wondering how can you use WiltCast in your daily job, and how can you use it like the best way possible? So remember, you just have to input the locations of the originally infected trees, which were the purple ones, by just clicking them on the map, and the healthy trees, which were the green ones. You also just click those on the map, and then you can input the environmental data that either NASA's or your own. And then once you run WiltCast, you'll get a prediction, right? So with that inference, you can prioritize trees that will be infected first. So the trees that turn orange first are the ones that are going to be infected first. And those are the ones that you can focus your trenching and injection efforts on, because obviously oak wilt will spread more from those trees. So you can try and cut it off at the source. You can also prioritize the entire outbreaks. So if you're an arborist who's looking at like multiple disease centers, you can run this analysis on both of them, and you can see which one has a higher rate of spread, and therefore which one will be the more dangerous disease center. So you can prioritize treating that one first. And by doing this, you can save your time and your money. So as with any ML model, WillCast does have some limitations. So WillCast is trained exclusively on live oaks because our data comes from Austin, in which the majority of oak trees are live oaks, and therefore we didn't have a large data set of red or white oaks in which the spread of oak wilt is very different. So we would have needed a lot of data of both red and white oaks, which we don't have. WiltCast also doesn't factor in physical obstacles or topography differences. Like, for example, if two trees are horizontally 10 feet apart, but there's a road or like a cliff in between them, it's not clear that the roots would be grafted and the disease would spread from one tree to another. So we haven't currently accounted for that. WiltCast is also only trained and validated in urban and suburban areas because our data came from Austin. So our spread in rural areas and forests may be a little bit different, which is something we're hoping to fix in the future. Um, WiltCast also is also trained on an incomplete data set because reporting for oak wilt isn't perfect, because there's a lack of staffing and a lack of funding. And public land is also very overrepresented in these records because um, if you're treating oak wilt on private land, there's obviously someone who owns that land, and the process is not as simple as it would be for public land. There's also reporting bias with, for example, if I live in North Austin and my community is very, very involved with reporting oak wilt, as soon as they see a tree that might have any signs of oak wilt, we will be overrepresented in the data set because we report just so much more.
We would like to go through some acknowledgements before we continue. I really want to thank a lot of our members who are here today. Let's see. Yes, we have plenty of them here, so I'd just like to acknowledge them all. Dr. David Apple, Mr. Jean Gehring, Dr. Damien Gomez, Dr. Guzman, Alan Halter, Shruti Srinivasan, and Camille Wiseman, who a lot of them are here today. We're really, really grateful for your help on going through this project. And and for our help throughout the next few steps. All right.
So all those limitations I talked about, we hope to mitigate or eliminate as many of those limitations as we can with WiltCast 2.0. But first, we're going to have to take a few steps. The first being working with local arborist companies to make sure that our model is good in the field in their actual work and to get their feedback on how we can improve both our model and our user interface. We also hope to make WiltCast publicly available and make it open source, as well as publishing research on it so that everybody can know about WiltCast and use it for themselves. We also um, we also understand that there are some other factors that affect the spread of oak wilt that we haven't considered, like for example, soil type. So we plan to experiment with this additional data and hopefully incorporate it into our model in the future. And the last thing we we really hope to get before WiltCast 2.0 is your feedback so that we can make it better. So the first thing I wanted to ask was, are there any features that you don't currently see that you would like to have? I think on Zoom you can raise your hand in the bottom.
I think I think that was Mr. Gehring or Mr. DeBrock. I think you can just unmute actually. I saw someone unmute.
Morning, everyone. This is Vincent with Heritage Tree Care here in Austin. Uh, Ruhan and Varun, thank you so much. This is really fun work that you guys did and pretty impressive. You just finished by saying about the 2.0 version where you wanted to introduce more factors, more soil types, for example. I would say to get more data points and commercial arborists are not researchers and not data collectors. It's going to be very hard to get folks like me and my staff to provide that data. We've tried in the past. I've tried to collaborate a whole lot, but it's just not included in our daily routine. It's very tricky. But data points that we like, and we always thought about, there's all these theories out there about topography impacts, about soil type impacts, about weather patterns, about where the waterways, where the subsurface water flows, basically root density translated into quicker the oak will spread in one direction versus another because that's where the roots are. So there's all these little data points that could be added as your WiltCast 2.0 data gathering. And if we don't know which data points you're collecting, the data collectors are not going to know what to collect. So that communication would be a good step to ask who's interested in what data, basically. But we're kind of flailing around with oak wilt, as I think everybody knows. We know more or less what speed and distance it goes. We never know the direction in which it goes. And we don't know why one cluster seems to be spreading a lot faster than some others where they seem very stable. There's all the impacts of utilities underground, the amount of roots going into a different soil type. So right now, it's a fun thing to see that you validate what we've all been using, which is the speed and distance and time frame. I don't know how far out you can take that. So, but I'm really interesting to see where you're going with it. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of the concerns that you raised are quite valid, actually, regarding the limitations with working with commercial arbor companies. That makes a lot of sense. From some of the work that we've and information we've received from our mentors, there are some publicly accessible data sets regarding the soil type. So there are some layers of basically information about the earth and the soil which we can pull from and see how useful that data is, including the particle size of the soil in that area, whether the ground has more clay in it or if it's more like dry and rocky sand. So we will continue to look through that and hopefully see how we can use public data sets as well because we understand it's not 100%. It's not very easy as well to work with really busy arbor companies who, especially as we get into the peak season. So we appreciate that. We appreciate that. As for the smaller nuances when it comes to predicting the data, to predicting the spread. We agree. We understand that beyond a certain point, it becomes quite difficult to predict all of these small nuances. We are thinking about some new ideas when it comes to looking at the direction of the roots. For example, if there's water in the area, if we have some trees that are near a creek, for example, we know that naturally trees are going to want to go towards the creek to pull water from. So there's just these small biological nuances that we would like to do some further research on, some further literature research and see how we can apply that to the future version of WiltCast. Thank you so much. All right. I think we'll go through the rest of the hands and then we'll get to the questions in the chat. Dr. Gomez, if you'd like to go ahead.
Hey guys, thanks for that presentation. That was super cool. I'm glad that like you guys are putting all this work into this and look into these models. I think it's a great starting point. We met before to kind of like talk about some of these kind of like what's happening in the background, right? And I think that's kind of like one of the interesting things, and maybe like some of my questions, like suggestions, that we've talked before, right? So I think it's important to highlight that from all the variables that are you're including, some of them are going to be important for the spread in the roots. However, some of them might be more relevant for beetle spread, right? So like it's important to
Mhm.
differentiate those, and probably some of the stuff that you're including, like wind and things like that, is going to be less relevant in explaining the variation that you see. And when we look at the like what's happening in the background, we saw that, right? Like the what is called the spread of the distance of infected trees was accounting for 85 plus of the variation, which is first very interesting because like that kind of like confirms that 75 feet that we've been using, and I think that's important, right? Like actually looking at these models and confirming that information that was pulled from data from the 80s and 90s and still happening, which is very relevant. But then you kind of like address that as well, the inclusion of the soil type, right? We know that the roots are going to be distributed differently in different soil types, and um, that is maybe like have a impact on explaining some of the variation more than all the other like maybe like environmental variables, right? And if I'm not mistaken, like all of those what accounted for like less than 1% of the variation that you were seeing in the data. So important to highlight
Mhm.
that um, and this is kind of like a question, like is part of this model actually telling you or testing for those variables in terms of like what variables are relevant to explain what you're seeing, right? As a first step, because maybe we can think about a next step of like, okay, let's take another variable that might be like soil type or topography or some other stuff, and check on what variables are really relevant, right? And like pick up those three variables and build those models based on that. So I think this is like a fantastic, great step. I appreciate you guys putting all of this together. And also, offer we've said that before, from our perspective. I know testing the things can be tricky in terms of timing and everything with arborists, but we definitely I would like to offer the mortality center data that we have for the whole state, because I think for if we grab like all the data from the last maybe 4 or 5 years that we have, over even from the last 10 years since we've been collecting like good GIS data, and we used to build these predictive models, it could actually extrapolate the data like way better, right? And we
Mhm.
can not only look at urban settings but also rural and what is happening like landscape level, and that could be really cool. So um, yeah, from my side, happy to support those efforts with the next steps. But yeah, I appreciate you guys putting all of that together.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sorry, you can go, Ruhan.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Gomez. We just talked with you just a couple days ago, so we're really, really thankful for you coming here. Yeah, a lot of features are incredibly important, and I think something that we'll do once we start writing our research paper and such is we'll do some more feature analysis to see how these features affect the model, and we'll probably also do an ablation study just to see how truly impactful some of these features are, including the weather data, just to make sure that we're going after the right variables here so that we can like accurately predict it. And we'll definitely follow up with you for future feature related information. So thank
Yeah,
you for that.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Varun, if you'd like to go ahead.
Um, yeah, I was gonna say basically the same thing.
Mhm.
Like, thank you so much for offering your data and also helping us so much. I think um I think Miss Adams had her hand up, so if you want to unmute.
Yeah. Um, Thanks for the invitation to come see your presentation and see the modeling that you're building. This is pretty innovative in regards to oak wilt. Um, the one thing that I think you need to consider when adding more data and increasing accuracy is not necessarily looking at soil types, but looking at local geology. Especially in urban areas, soil is usually very disturbed. And so, what may have been documented in historical data of what are the native soils, especially within city limits, are probably not accurate for what's actually existing. Just because oftentimes with building sites, they strip off the O, A, and B horizons, and then they build the structure, and then they'll bring in topsoil back. And oftentimes they just put down enough topsoil to sustain turf grass and not necessarily um, sustain tree health, especially for longevity. But excuse me. But one thing that I've learned about oak wilt, especially in Texas, is that in some of these locations, most tree roots grow in the upper 16 inches of soil because they need oxygen and water. But when you have geology like karst geology, which is where you get caves, caverns, and rock fissures, which is really common in the Austin area and then in the hill country. Those tree roots can grow much deeper because they can get into those rock fissures and they have water and oxygen that they continue to grow. So, some of the work that's been done here in Texas is notice that some of those tree roots can be 20 to 30 feet deep at least. And so, which is another reason why trenching doesn't always work. And so, fortunately, the U.S. Geological Survey have maps of all the different types of geology. And I think that would be a really valuable contribution to your data. And I think that would be a better predictive parameter for root spread.
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Um, we had to consider some things that were kind of similar to this if we go all the way back to 1970, especially or like to the beginning of our data set because of just how much has changed in Austin specifically with regards to these artificial changes to the environment from construction to all sorts of new additions to Austin. So I think that's a really good point, and we will definitely take a look at the geology from the USGS information. So thank you so much. So, we'll definitely look into that.
I think Mr. Halter, you had your hand up.
Yes. Thank you for the presentation and for using our data. I'm Alan Halter, and I'm with the City of Austin. We provided a lot of the oak wilt data that fed into the model. So thank you for using that data and putting it to good use. Um, I just wanted to answer your question about the features as a GIS person. There's two features that I think they're kind of simple, and you might find them in a lot of other types of web maps. But I think two features that might help with user adoption and having people use the tool and encourage them to use the tool is one, just doing a simple like address search bar. For people to be able to like find their address, and maybe they're in a different city and they're unfamiliar with the area. So being able to, anything that helps them wayfind and figure out where they want to focus their efforts. That would be very helpful. And then the other feature, there was somewhere in there where you were doing the demo, you were adding all the various points of the infected trees and then the healthy trees. And there was a comment about there being a kind of like a minimum distance of 200 feet from the infected area that's pretty much ideal for your model to be able to run. Um, some type of like circle radius from where you enter those infected trees, and an explanation for people to understand that like the best case scenario is that we have all these trees within this kind of range inventoried. The model's going to run better. It's going to give you a better output. That would be very helpful for users to see. I think we get that like if you're using Google Maps or Apple Maps, you get kind of like a radius of where you're currently standing with your phone and your GPS, and then it kind of shows you a little radius bubble from there. But that's kind of what I'm imagining. So those are two features I think that would be really cool to see. So, but that's all I had to say. Really good job.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think those things wouldn't be very hard to implement, and so yeah, and they would make a large impact for the user. So yes, we do plan to implement those in the future. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I think Miss Adams, you had another question.
Yeah, I would just keep thinking through all the different variables that contribute to oak wilt. And what Damien mentioned was especially the beetle spread, which is a really kind of interesting, complicating factor because you're just working with another living organism. And so you have to work with its biology too. So I think a couple other variables that you could consider contribute or adding into this is especially weather storm data. So if there's going to be major winds and especially branch breakage during periods when the beetles are active, you'll have increased spread through the beetles. Um, and so, fortunately, with that, there's good weather data and where that storm damage occurred, especially, if you're working with Mr. Halter in the city of Austin, they definitely document where their crews go out and have to clean up storm damage. Um, the other one is understanding prevailing winds. These are beetles that are very, very small, only a couple of millimeters long. So, adding in the prevailing winds will also probably help predict where they might be able to fly and where they're being pushed. Um, and then again, with the beetles is they do have their kind of preferred temperatures that they're going to be more active during. And so that could be another variable. So it'll be really interesting when you're working on diseases, especially that have a vector, an insect vector. It just adds that next level of complexity. So I'm really excited to see WiltCast 3.0 to see how all these different variables will increase accuracy.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's actually another really, really, really good point. There's a lot of things to consider. I do remember back when we had that the Valentine's Day storm a few years ago, and that was at least in my area as well. We actually had a whole tree fall down and everything. It was like the ice was just so much it broke a ton of branches, and then after that, it kind of pushed the entire biological cycle over. Even now, we can still start to see, at least in the area where I live, there's some trees that still think it's fall, even though it's like February. So I think that's really important to consider as in addition to the amount of climate change that we're experiencing, to consider the event of some sort of natural disasters in specific areas, as it makes a big impact towards the stress levels of the trees, in addition to obviously the physical damage done to them. We'll also look into that. There's a lot to consider. So we'll definitely we'll order all the features and we'll kind of go through the list. But thank you for bringing that up. That sounds awesome. I want to go over a couple
Right. Can
questions that
I?
we. Oh yeah, go ahead. You can go ahead,
I kept trying
Mr.
to find
Gary.
my hand and I'm
Uh,
not finding it on my screen. But again, I also want to iterate and thank y'all for putting this together and inviting people and looking at this. Um, you mentioned the difference between urban, rural. I I think that the urban sites that you used were pretty much Austin.
in the areas that you were in, it was all native trees or trees that were growing there, uh, essentially before urbanization. Um, Looking at it from the standpoint of trees that were planted, like when you get up in the North Texas
Mhm.
area, Dallas, the mid cities area, neighborhoods that are 20, 30, 40 years old where all the trees were planted. And particularly dating back to the 80s when everybody put two live oaks in their front yard. And looking at that aspect of it as opposed to strictly urban, suburban, rural.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I think, yeah, we didn't actually consider that the differences between a planted tree and a tree that was already there. So, yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. I think, yeah, that's a good thing to consider.
I think what we can also do is look at where we can look for some data to see how first of all like obviously how the tree is growing in these environments to see how the roots develop and things like that. But also maybe what are some common trees that are not native to Texas or not native to this main area which are being planted. So there surely may be a few. So we can also look at that and see about those trees and additions that are made to the environment that are not exactly natural. So I think that's a really, really good additional point to consider. So thank you very much. All right, I'm
And
going
kind
to.
of the other part of that I wanted to say is like the rural areas, particularly with uh, the online mapping that's available out there now, finding a spot that you can go back and pull the photography, say 20 years ago, and utilizing like the Texas Forest Service data, you can go, all right, we know that this was oak wilt in, say, the year 2000. And then you can go in and actually mark what trees were there at that point and then pull maps or aerial photography that in subsequent years. I mean, I think that actually probably be easier than in urban sites where trees don't stay up very long, particularly out
Mhm.
you get out in the hill country. I mean, there's areas that I am sure. Well, actually, having looked at aerial photography, I mean, you could totally do that. So,
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good avenue to look at the data from. Um, Yeah, we know that apps like Google Earth and such are really helpful for seeing the spread over time. But yeah, we also do recognize the issue of differences in the in urban settings versus out in rural country area in terms of how quickly these trees are removed and things like that. But yeah, I think that's a good way for us to test or rather evaluate the data that we're being given to confirm what we're seeing from the model perspective. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we haven't really incorporated a satellite map into our user interface as of now because it makes predictions that are now and there aren't and the satellite view maps aren't very updated very often. So that's why we're not using it in our user interface itself. But yeah, you're right. We should use it for validation or for just further research. I agree.
All right, I'm going to go through some of the questions we have in the chat. Uh, First of all, again, I'd like to thank, I see we have a few people who are actually not even from the United States, so that's really, really cool to see. All right, so Mr. Halter asked for data collectors, what's a recommendation you'd make to improve the training data that we received? I think personally, when it came to developing these clusters, right, at the beginning, we actually did have a conversation with Mr. Halter about the delimitations regarding this data. And we learned that in some cases here, these trees that were being reported in the data were only reported when they were going to be treated immediately. So, like, for example, if we were to put a fungicide injection, that would be like this, we would be doing that fungicide injection the same day that it was being reported in the data set, which can lead to some issues when it comes to creating these clusters, because in reality, this tree has been infected for way longer than we think it has been. So, for recommendations, perhaps if there was some sort of way to say if this was like the first or second occurrence, or if it's going to, if it's actively being treated after it's been immediately identified, because I feel in some cases, if we knew, for example, that some of these trees here may have already been like are going to be infected, are going to be treated with like a fungicide injection the same exact day, then we can kind of tell this has been a prolonged infection that's happened for a couple of years before that. So a little bit more data regarding that would be awesome. Just to also consider how valid these clusters can be, because we acknowledge there may be some imperfections with the way that we've generated these clusters due to some things that are not in the data set. So, um, how many oak wilt clusters did we find in the data provided? We found a total of 79 clusters, and that comprised of nearly 1,000 total records. I believe our data set had 1,700-ish or so. Um, in total, I think it was closer to 1,800 total, but we were able to extract over 50% of that data into clusters, which was very, very helpful. These clustering parameters, we do actually have quite a few more after this. We calculate like some physics equations and such in here to try and get really accurate clusters that really show the progression over time. As a result of that, we did have some data that we just did not use since it didn't really clearly fit into a cluster. It may have just been a one-off case without any future or past reports in that area. All right. Jamie Martin has a question about any chance for expanding on oaks better outside of live oaks. It's a great question. It's a great question. There are obviously all across the United States, there are just way more than just live oaks. Um, for the most part, we want to work on refining our methodology and our training process for specifically for live oaks. Also, since this is a bit more personal to us, since we do have a lot of oak wilt in our area. In fact, one of the trees in my front yard died of oak wilt just a few years ago, which is kind of unfortunate. I think it was over 100 years old. So. As a result of that, and with our current information with live oak information, we want to focus on this first. We do have plans in the future to work on red oaks and white oaks and a lot of additional trees, which are also very, very affected by oak wilt. Um, but due to the confounding variables that we may have because of the biology of the tree and such, we want to work on live oaks first and then expand to more later.
Yeah, as we said earlier, we would need like lots and lots of red or white oak data if we were to work on those types of trees. So if we eventually get access to that data, yes, we do plan to like expand our model to that.
And Mr. Halter once again said that iNaturalist would have research level data on other tree species in Austin. I think that's great, and that's very important. We'll look at it, and we'll see a total list of like these planted or cultivated trees. So that's awesome. All right, so I think we've gone through all of the questions here. Um, Once again, I just want to thank everyone here one more time. We have received so much help since like July of last year, and I think that is so cool that we have been able to talk to people actually across the country who have been willing to put in so much time to help us out. Um, I personally and Varun, and we both just could not be more grateful for all of your help. But if there are no more questions, then I think we're good to go. Um, we will send out a Google form with just a little bit more of this information if you happen to think of anything else. Um, and if you would like to just provide a bit more feedback about what we can do to bring some more impact and improve the research of our model, we would love to hear from you via that Google form. But thank you very, very much, and we'll see you. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you
Thanks so
so
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.